In 1970, General Motors finally did the one thing every performance engineer in Detroit had been begging for since 1964. It lifted its own rule. For 6 straight years, GM had capped the engines allowed in its midsize cars at 400 cubic inches or less, a corporate policy meant to protect its full-size flagships from being embarrassed by their smaller, cheaper siblings. In 1970, that rule simply disappeared. Buick, Oldsmobile, and Pontiac all reached straight for their 455 cubic inch big blocks. Chevrolet bored its own engine out to 454. And for one single unforgettable model year, the muscle car war had absolutely no ceiling left on it at all. By the end of this countdown, you'll know exactly which 10 American cars earned the right to be called the fastest of 1970, and why so many historians still call this exact year the true peak of the entire muscle car era, right before the industry pulled the plug on itself. This isn't just a list of fast cars. This is the story of the single year Detroit had absolutely nothing left holding it back. No displacement caps, no corporate committees demanding restraint, nothing but raw horsepower and whatever an engineering department could dream up. It's also the story of the exact moment that freedom started quietly costing buyers everything they had. Insurance companies were already circling by the end of 1970, and within 2 years, almost every engine on this list would be gone for good. With General Motors' 400 cubic inch intermediate rule finally rescinded, 1970 saw an explosion of genuinely massive factory engines hit mid-size cars all at once. Chevrolet's Chevelle got the new 454. Buick, Oldsmobile, and Pontiac all dropped in their own 455 cubic inch big blocks. Chrysler Corporation, never one to be outdone, finally approved its legendary 426 Hemi for the redesigned Barracuda and Challenger, joining the already massive 440 in Chrysler's mid-size lineup. But the same year that gave Detroit total freedom also planted the seeds of its own destruction. Insurance companies had begun tracking horsepower ratings and quarter-mile times closely, and by the end of 1970, premiums on the most powerful muscle cars were already climbing sharply for young male drivers, the exact demographic buying most of these cars in the first place. Rising insurance costs, combined with looming federal emission standards just around the corner, meant 1970 would turn out to be a genuine high watermark, not a starting point for something even bigger. Let's start the countdown. Number 10 introduces one of the most patriotic, most unapologetically loud muscle cars of the entire era, American Motors' one-year-only Rebel Machine. Built on AMC's mid-size Rebel platform, the machine came standard with a 390 cubic inch V8, factory rated at 340 horsepower and 430 pound-feet of torque, along with a functional hood scoop featuring a built-in tachometer, heavy-duty suspension, and a distinctive red, white, and blue paint scheme that made it impossible to miss on the street. It was AMC's most direct, most serious attempt yet to prove America's smallest major automaker could hang with the Big Three's muscle car offerings. Just 2,326 Rebel machines were built for the single model year the car existed, and its bold, flag-waving styling has made it one of the more distinctive, if often overlooked, entries from the entire golden age of American muscle. Number 9 keeps Ford's smaller, road race-focused Boss Mustang rolling into its second and most refined model year. Built specifically to homologate Ford's Trans Am racing program, the Boss 302 continued to use a specially built high-revving small block, factory rated at 290 horsepower, paired with genuinely excellent suspension tuning that consistently earned it praise for handling far superior to most of its big-block muscle car rivals. Unlike nearly every other car on this list, the Boss 302 wasn't built to win at the drag strip. It was built to win on a road course, and by most accounts, it did exactly that. It remains one of the most respected Mustangs of the entire era among serious enthusiasts, a reminder that raw horsepower numbers weren't the only measure of what made a genuinely great performance car in 1970. Number 8 brings Dodge's brand new pony car into its very first model year, already carrying Chrysler Corporation's most legendary engine option. The all-new 1970 Challenger RT offered the 426 Hemi as a rare, expensive option, factory-rated at 425 horsepower and 490 pound-feet of torque, the exact same engine found in Plymouth's Cuda, wrapped in Dodge's own distinct styling. Just like its Plymouth sibling, the Hemi Challenger required a substantial premium over the standard RT, and buyers who checked that option box knew exactly what kind of insurance conversation was waiting for them at renewal time. Production numbers for the Hemi Challenger remain genuinely small for its debut year, and today, a documented numbers-matching Hemi Challenger RT ranks among the most valuable Mopar muscle cars any collector can hope to find. Proof that Dodge's new pony car arrived already fully equipped to compete with anything else in Detroit. Number 7 brings Chrysler's radical aerodynamic experiment back for a second, even more dramatic season: the winged, pointed-nose Plymouth Superbird. Built as Plymouth's own version of the Dodge Daytona's Aero Warrior formula, the Superbird featured an even longer nose cone and towering rear wing, engineered specifically to keep Richard Petty competitive on NASCAR's fastest superspeedways after he'd briefly defected to Ford the year before. Buyers could order either the 440 cubic inch V8 or the legendary 426 Hemi, factory rated at 425 horsepower and 490 pound-feet of torque. Plymouth built 1,920 Superbirds to satisfy NASCAR's homologation requirement, nearly 4 times the Daytona's 1969 production run. And the car proved so effective on the track that NASCAR banned the entire winged car category from competition the following season, bringing Detroit's brief but spectacular aero war to a definitive close. Number 6 brings Pontiac's flagship muscle car into its most powerful configuration yet, wrapped in the loud, youth-focused Judge package. The 1970 GTO Judge came available with the Ram Air 4 400 cubic inch V8, and for the first time, buyers could also order a genuine 455 cubic inch engine, taking full advantage of GM's newly lifted displacement rule. Wrapped in bold graphics, a rear spoiler, and Pontiac's signature Endura front bumper, the Judge remained one of the most visually aggressive muscle cars in America, even as newer, cheaper rivals continued chipping away at the GTO's once unquestioned sales dominance. It represented Pontiac's clearest attempt yet to keep the nameplate that had started the entire muscle car era feeling fresh and relevant, 6 full years after the original loophole-built GTO first hit showrooms. Number 5 brings Oldsmobile's well-regarded performance package to its biggest engine yet, finally free of the displacement rule that had held it back for years. The 1970 W30 dropped the new 455 cubic inch Rocket V8 into the 442, complete with Oldsmobile's forced air induction system, factory rated at 370 horsepower and a genuinely massive 500 pound-feet of torque. Combined with the 442's long-standing reputation for excellent handling, the 1970 W30 gave Oldsmobile a genuinely complete package, serious straight-line power paired with the kind of balanced chassis tuning that had always set the 442 apart from its noisier rivals. Many period road testers considered the 1970 W30 the single best driving muscle car General Motors built that year, a genuine combination of raw power and real-world usability that few of its rivals could match. Before this countdown reaches its final 5 cars, it's worth pausing on the quiet threat already circling the entire muscle car era in 1970. Insurance companies had spent years watching horsepower ratings climb, and by 1970, actuaries had finally connected the dots between big block engines and accident claims among young drivers. Surcharges specifically targeting high-performance models began appearing on policies across the country, sometimes adding hundreds of dollars a year to the cost of insuring a car like a Hemi Cuda or an LS6 Chevelle, often more than the monthly car payment itself for a young buyer. Manufacturers had spent years deliberately underrating horsepower figures, specifically to stay ahead of this exact problem. By 1970, it wasn't working anymore. Combined with looming federal emissions regulations that would force compression ratios down within just a year or two, the insurance industry's sudden attention to horsepower is one of the most important, least glamorous reasons the muscle car era began its rapid decline almost immediately after this remarkable model year ended. Number 4 isn't the most powerful car on this list, but it might be the most purpose-built. Plymouth's AAR Cuda, engineered specifically for road racing rather than the drag strip. Built to homologate Plymouth's Trans Am racing program with driver Dan Gurney's All-American Racers team, the AAR Cuda used a specially built 340 cubic inch small block with 3 two-barrel Holley carburetors, factory rated at 290 horsepower, paired with a staggered rear tire setup and side exit exhaust borrowed directly from its racing counterpart. SCCA's homologation rules required a minimum of 2,500 street versions, and Plymouth built 2,724 examples in a single 5-week production run between March and April of 1970. It remains one of the most distinctive, most purpose-built Cudas of the entire era, smaller, lighter, and more focused on cornering ability than any of its big block siblings, built purely to satisfy a racing sanctioning body's paperwork, exactly like several of the most memorable homologation specials that came before it. Number 3 might be the most quietly dominant car on this entire list, Buick's GSX Stage 1. A torque monster that Motor Trend magazine crowned the single quickest American production car of the entire model year. The Stage 1 package took Buick's new 455 cubic inch V8, added a hotter camshaft, larger valves, and revised carburetor jetting, officially rated at a conservative 360 horsepower, but a genuinely massive 510 pound-feet of torque at just 2,800 RPM, numbers most testers at the time simply refused to believe were accurate. Motor Trend recorded a 13.38-second quarter mile in a Stage 1 test car, a time that put it ahead of nearly every rival on this list in a straight-line drag race, despite its comparatively modest official horsepower rating. It's a perfect example of Buick's understated, torque-first approach to the horsepower war, paying off in the most literal way possible. A car that quietly out-accelerated far louder, far flashier competitors simply by refusing to chase peak horsepower numbers the way everyone else in Detroit was. Number 2 brings the legendary 426 Hemi into the all-new E-Body Barracuda for the very first time, creating what many collectors still consider the single most desirable muscle car Detroit ever built. Wrapped in the Cuda's aggressive new low-slung body and topped with the iconic shaker hood scoop, poking directly through the hood and visibly shaking with the engine's own movement, the Hemi Cuda's 426 cubic inch V8 was factory rated at 425 horsepower and 490 pound-feet of torque. Numbers most historians agree were deliberately conservative, with dyno testing on stock engines regularly exceeding 460 to 500 horsepower once fitted with proper headers. Despite the Barracuda selling nearly 49,000 units for 1970, just 666 buyers checked the box for the Hemi option, largely scared off by its roughly $900 price premium and the insurance costs that came with it. That combination of scarcity and sheer unfiltered brutality has made the 1970 Hemi Cuda one of the most valuable muscle cars in the entire hobby today, with genuine examples regularly commanding well over $1 million at major auctions. And that brings us to number 1, the single most powerful factory muscle car engine ever officially rated by any American manufacturer, the Chevrolet Chevelle SS 454 LS6. With GM's 400 cubic inch rule finally gone, Chevrolet bored its 427 out to 454 cubic inches and offered it in 2 distinct states of tune: the milder hydraulic cam LS5 at 360 horsepower and the solid lifter LS6, fitted with an aluminum intake, forged internals, and an 800 CFM Holley carburetor, officially rated at 450 horsepower and 500 pound-feet of torque. No production engine before it, and arguably none built since among genuinely street-legal factory muscle cars, had ever carried a higher official rating. Even that extraordinary number is widely believed to have been conservative, with many independent estimates placing the real output north of 500 horsepower. Just 4,475 LS6 equipped Chevelles and El Caminos were built for the entire model year, running the quarter mile in the low 13-second range straight off the showroom floor. It represented the absolute ceiling of what Detroit's engineers were willing and able to build once every corporate restriction finally disappeared. And it earned a top spot on this list as the single most powerful factory muscle car of the entire Golden Age, arriving in the very last year before insurance and emissions regulations made a car like it impossible to build ever again. So what did all of this actually prove? That the moment Detroit's engineers were finally given complete freedom from corporate displacement rules, they built the single most powerful lineup of factory muscle cars America would ever see in one model year. That some of the most legendary names in the entire hobby, the Hemi Cuda, the LS6 Chevelle, the GSX Stage 1, all traced their absolute peak back to this exact 12 months. And that the very same year proved Detroit's total freedom was also the beginning of the end, as insurance companies and federal regulators both started paying very, very close attention to exactly what these engines could do. It's easy to understand, looking back with more than 50 years of hindsight, why so many collectors and historians point to 1970 as the single greatest year the muscle car era ever produced. Every restriction Detroit had lived under for the past 6 years disappeared all at once, and for one glorious, unrepeatable model year, the horsepower war had absolutely nothing left holding it back. Which 1970 American car would you bring back if you could only choose one? The record-setting Chevelle LS6, the legendary Hemi Cuda, or the sleeper Buick GSX Stage 1? Did your father, your uncle, or a neighbor on your street own one of these cars? Write the name in the comments below.